continent on high alert. Putin says Europe's militarization won't go unanswered. With drones crossing borders, frozen assets at stake, and threats of missile strikes, Russia warns of swift retaliation. The West watches nervously. Is this a warning or the spark for a new European crisis? Russian President Vladimir Putin said on October 2nd that Moscow will quickly respond should Europe provoke amid what he cast as a hysterical militarization of the continent, but said he had no intention of attacking the US-led NATO alliance.
We simply cannot ignore what's happening. We have no right to do so for reasons of our own security. I repeat, our defense and security. Therefore, we are closely monitoring the escalating militarization of Europe. Is this just talk, or is it time for us to take countermeasures? We hear, and you know this. In Germany, for example, they say that the German army should once again be the most powerful in Europe. Well, fine, we're listening carefully, watching. What exactly is meant by that? I think no one doubts that Russia's response will not be long in coming. The response to these threats will be, to put it mildly, very convincing. It's precisely a response. We ourselves have never initiated a military confrontation.
Putin's remarks come amid rising tensions between Russia and the West, particularly in Europe. His warning followed Europe's growing militarization, including expanded drone defenses and NATO deployments, US consideration of supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, EU discussions to use frozen Russian assets to aid Kyiv, and increasing sanctions. Moscow views these moves as provocative, escalating tensions without directly threatening NATO.
If anyone does desire to compete with us in the military sphere, then, as we say, free will, let them try. Russia has proven time and again that when a threat arises to our security, the peace and tranquility of our citizens, our sovereignty, and our very statehood, we respond swiftly. There is no need to provoke us. Our history has proven that weakness is unacceptable. Russia will never show weakness or indecision. Let those whom we hinder by our very existence remember this. Those who cherish dreams of inflicting this very strategic defeat on us.
Moscow also claimed that it was not engaged in a Cold War with the West, but in a fiery conflict. The war in Ukraine, Europe's deadliest since World War II, has ignited the most significant confrontation between Russia and the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, when asked whether a new Cold War had begun, said,
"I would disagree with the comparison with the Cold War Iron Curtain, like drone wall is being built in Europe. We are already in another form of conflict. There has been no cold here for a long time. There is already a fire here."
Less than 2 months after US President Donald Trump met President Vladimir Putin at a summit in Alaska, prospects for peace appear even more distant. Russian forces continue advancing in Ukraine. Russian drones are allegedly entering NATO airspace, and Washington is now discussing the possibility of striking deep into the world's largest nuclear power. When asked about European accusations that Russia had violated NATO airspace, carried out sabotage operations, and hacked key installations, Zakharova dismissed the claims as baseless, saying they reflected preparations for provocations against Moscow.
All their statements indicate, first, that they are preparing a chain of provocations. Second, that they need to justify their military budgets.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking on the recent Russian drone incursions into European airspace, said,
"The recent drone incidents across Europe are a clear sign that Russia still feels bold enough to escalate this war. And it was never just about Ukraine. Russia has always aimed to break the West and Europe in particular."
Addressing a summit of European leaders in Copenhagen, Zelensky said,
"We need fast and effective response and defense forces that know how to deal with drones."
European Union leaders on Wednesday endorsed plans to strengthen the bloc's defences against Russian drones, following airspace violations that rattled Denmark. Authorities have also accused Russia of brazen incursions over Poland and fighter jet flights over Estonia. Zelensky further called for the 19th package of sanctions against Russia, proposed by the European Commission in September, describing it as urgently needed. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov warned on October 2nd that the world remains far from achieving peace, nearly 6 weeks after the Russia-US summit in Alaska. Speaking to reporters, Peskov criticized European nations, accusing them of encouraging Ukraine to abandon negotiations and prolong the conflict with Russia. He suggested that rather than seeking a diplomatic resolution, Europe is focused on fueling the war, framing Ukraine's ongoing military actions as part of a broader strategy to counter Moscow. The Kremlin further warned that supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine for strikes deep inside Russia would trigger a new and dangerous round of escalation between Moscow and the West. Peskov said Russia had seen reports that the United States was considering such a move and stressed that any deployment of long-range missiles would demand a response from Moscow.
If this happens, it will be a new serious round of tension that will require an adequate response from the Russian side.
At the same time, Peskov downplayed the potential impact of such weapons, adding,
But on the other hand, it also remains obvious that there is no magic pill, no magic weapon for the Kyiv regime. No weapon can radically change the course of events.
The comments follow a statement by US Vice President J.D. Vance on September 30th, confirming that Washington was reviewing Ukraine's request for Tomahawk missiles. Meanwhile, Russia dismissed the European Union's discussions about using its frozen assets to provide loans to Ukraine as delusional, and warned that such a move would provoke a very tough response from Moscow. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said any attempt to manipulate Russian assets would constitute a violation of international law. She emphasized that Russia possesses a wide array of economic and political tools to respond appropriately.
In European Commission, they are promoting the idea of an absolute illegitimate use of blocked, stolen Russian state reserves, which are mainly in the Belgian depository Euroclear. Now, it is about the idea of an unprecedented loan to Ukraine, to be repaid through some future reparations payments from the Russian Federation, as you quoted earlier. In other words, they propose that Russia buy back later its own assets that were blocked in EU jurisdiction. I don't even want to discuss this idea itself, it's so delusional.
Zakharova also reminded EU governments, particularly Belgium, where the bulk of Russian assets are frozen, of their obligations under international law, urging them to act in compliance with existing agreements. Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said that Russia would only end its war in Ukraine if forced to do so, warning that Moscow's aggression posed a threat not just to Ukraine, but to the security of all Europe.
Russia will not stop until they are forced to do so. And they are a threat, not only to Ukraine, but to all of us. Today we have one major task ahead of us. We have to make our common Europe so strong that war against us becomes unthinkable. And we have to do it now. But peace with Russia can only be achieved through strength. We have to strengthen Ukraine and weaken Russia with more sanctions. We have to be able to finance the armed forces in Ukraine. All of us have to deliver more weapons, more ammunition, and we have to do it faster. Nowhere it will make a greater impact for European security than at the front lines in Ukraine.
Frederiksen made the remarks while hosting a summit of the European Political Community, EPC, in Copenhagen, where leaders from 47 countries convened to discuss continental security. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky attended the summit, which focused heavily on Russia's ongoing invasion and its wider geopolitical implications.